How's it going? I'm Edwin at Pinterest. I do insights. Let's jump in. So in this last section, if you spend more, do you save more? What we did was one of the most comprehensive pieces of work at Pinterest. What we looked at was over 10,000 CPC campaigns. And we wanted to see what ad delivery looked like. Was it a paid campaign, so it got in front of the consumer because the advertiser paid, or it got in front of the consumer because of earned media by way of a repin? Then we looked at engagement metrics, which we talked about in the last session. Was it just an impression? Did the pinner click through, close up, or repin? And then lastly, when you think about the tracking mechanisms, did we drive a conversion? And those conversion activities are very different. Was it a sign up? Was it actually buying something? Was it doing something else that they were tracking on the page itself? Ultimately, this slide might look confusing, but it really isn't. What the blue bars represent is from 1 day to 30, how did your conversions cumulatively build over time from the very first day? What I want you to pay attention to is really the red line. From day 1 to day 30, your CPA literally drops by 56%, over half. And the reason why that happens is the way the platform ultimately works. If you think about what Pinterest ultimately stands for, number one, we know that it's a planning platform, and the consumer ultimately gets on the platform much earlier. Number two, when you think about the platform dynamics, as opposed to us pushing content to consumers, it's literally pulled or customized to the consumer when they're ready for it. In fact, Wise Metric tells us that for most pins, half of the activity happens almost 3.5 months after the pin is actually released into the wild. And then number three, most importantly, the earned media that's generated. When you take a look at the repin in this chart specifically and include the repin in your conversions and your CPAs, it actually drops by another 10%. And so your CPA is cut by roughly 61%. So does engagement type actually matter to when a pinner converts? Let's see. The answer is yes. Again, what I want to do is take us back to that framework I talked about earlier. What we see is that on the left side, you have the likes, the sends, and the repins, and then on the right is the close-up and the click-through. It just takes more time when you think about those engagement metrics that are quote-unquote more emotive, back to that IAB framework that we talked about. At Pinterest, we like to talk about this as the consumer is quote-unquote marinating. And it's really baked into the data. When you think about how long it actually takes before conversion happens via a click-through, an impression, a close-up, or a repin, it's really different. 9 out of 10 conversions that happen as a result of a click-through happen the very same day. Whereas when you go to the right, the repin, you see that almost 80% happens 1 day or later. In fact, 50% of the time, it happens up to 7 days later. Really changing the way we need to think about attribution windows. For most of us, we have 1, 3, maybe 7 days to think about our attribution windows. Do we need to extend some of those things when we think about new platforms? What about the actual metric that I care about? Do I care about signups? Do I care about page visits or checkouts? Well, even still, you can see that when conversions happen truly matters. For signups, almost 9 out of 10 happen the very first day. And the reason why that's important is for most signups, about 60% of them go by way of a click-through, whereas for checkouts, it's only about 27%. So it really starts to tell you that when there is a click-through, it's usually because I want to sign up for something, not because I technically want to buy, because of that whole concept of the marination process. Is repin engagement valuable? We talk about that all the time. Is earned media valuable? And on our platform, the answer is yes. When we take a look at what happens on the very first day of spend, whether you have 10 repins or 100, it makes a huge difference. There's literally 8 times the difference in the number of conversions after a 30-day period. That's what we found across these 10,000 campaigns. Why is that important? Well, it's important for one of 3 reasons. Number one, it speaks to ad quality. When there's a significant number of repins, you know you've done a good job and consumers are willing to engage with your brand and your pin. Number two, that engagement is being followed by a group of people that you really want to see that ad. Case in point, I love ties and suits. And when I repin something like that, I see a number of people repin that pin that I don't even know. Birds of a feather flock together, so it's almost like instant targeting. And number three, it starts to help you evaluate whether your earned media is going to help you in the long run. So on the very first day, you can already see and start to model out what you're going to get after that attribution window is closed. At the end of the day, what's most exciting is that 15% of conversions actually happen from earned activity. What that ultimately means is that of 100 specific purchases, about 15 of them are usually free. So as I close and really think through what this ultimately means for Pinterest and for you, do you get more when connecting with our audience? The answer is yes. It's not just about scale and reach, but that effective and engaged scale and reach. And you can get that by way of, say, persona targeting. Number two, do promoted pins actually help pinners think differently about brands? Does it change hearts and minds? And we're only beginning to see in our ads measurements program that the answer is yes. Whether it's brand awareness, getting you to parity and moving forward, or even thinking about purchase intent and brand favorability, we're starting to see some really great results. Does pin engagement do more for your businesses? Well, we can actually see that the engagement that we have on our site and our platform, it is driving that emotional, cognitive, and physical response that ultimately helps move brands forward. And does investing in Pinterest do more in terms of helping you save more? Well, we're seeing that if you really think about what the platform means to the consumer and why they're coming, and you extend that attribution window, the answer is yes. And that's even before we talk about the earned media piece. Ultimately, what Pinterest provides is this opportunity to create that awareness, create that intent, and ultimately help us to action. It's all about discovering, saving, and doing on Pinterest. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about it today.